Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Dana and this is Delighted to DIY. If you like thrift flips and budget home decor DIYs, why don't you consider hitting that red subscribe button. For DIY number one, I started with this paper craft band that I got from Dollarama. It was $1.50 and there's 20 feet in it. I started by opening it and unraveling a little bit. I measured out about 8 inches, I believe, and cut a piece off and used that as my template to cut another 8 pieces all the same length. Once I had the 8 pieces cut, I took 4 at a time and straightened them out. I just did this by gently bending it backwards in the opposite direction of the curve. I did this to all of the 4 pieces, then the other 4, so 8 in total. With the straightened pieces, I began with 4 of them, laying them horizontally across my work surface. I spaced them as evenly as possible. They're about 1/2 inch apart. Then used some painter's tape to tape them to my work surface. Then I began weaving the next 4 pieces through those. If I started above, then I went above, under, over, under, and then the following piece would be the opposite, under, over, under, over. Once I had all 4 weaved in to make a square grid, a 3x3, I moved them over to the center just so that there was a roughly equal amounts around the edge. Then I used my hot glue and little dabs of, then I used my hot glue gun and little dabs of glue to glue the outer edges just again so they would stay in place and stay the size that I was needing. Today's video is part of an open playlist hosted by the lovely and most talented Heidi Sonboul from Heidi Sonboul DIY. I'll have a link to her channel down in my description box below. She's hosting this open playlist for all creators, and the only real requirements was at least one DIY that was fall themed. So I have brought you 3 Hobby Lobby inspired DIYs that are not exact dupes, as they are slightly different from my inspiration pictures, but they are very close and made for a lot less. I hope you enjoy them. Once my base grid was done being glued and intact, I went over with my roll of paper band and needed to measure out 4 more pieces that are going to be kind of our cross pieces. So I measured it to the size I needed and then just cut 1 and used it as a template to cut 3 more, so I would have 4 total. Then I did the same as in the beginning and just bent them backwards slightly to help flatten them out, and then proceeded to make the square shape on the top of the grid. So I went to each corner and kind of went halfway through that corner square to use as my guide to where I would glue these 4 pieces to the basket. This worked quite well and made it quite even, so I just continued this all the way around as my guide to glue all 4 pieces on using the corner squares and going halfway through them. After gluing these 4 pieces on, I flipped the grid over and begun bending up all the outer pieces. I bent them up about an inch out from the last piece that crossed, and then took the roll of band and went around the basket lightly or generously to get a rough measurement of how much I would need to make the edge pieces. Starting a few inches in from the end of the long piece we've just cut, I started at one of the corner pieces of the bent parts and added a dab of hot glue and adhered the long outer piece to the outside of this bent part. I then continued around the basket, adding a dab of hot glue to each of the bent pieces and gluing the long outer strip to the outside of these pieces, going all the way around. I hope that makes sense, but if it doesn't, let me know in the comments below and hopefully I can help make it a little more clear. Once all the pieces were glued to the outer part, I realized that I should have put the cross pieces in, but didn't realize that. So I had to rip off where it would tuck in So I ripped off a little piece from the outer basket part, stuck in the diagonal piece, glued it onto the outer edge, then re-glued that straight piece part of the grid back onto the outer edge. I did this for all four of the cross pieces. So anywhere that the cross had to fit in, this one was a little on the shorter side. So I was able to kind of just tuck it into the inside of the basket and hot glue it in place. But the other three all needed a piece of the basket removed so that I could fit the diagonal piece in. So again, I just kind of ripped it off of the edge, glued in the diagonal piece, then re-glued the cross pieces. Again, sorry, I'm not sure what terminology to use really, but hopefully you watching and kind of listening to what I'm saying will help you figure this all out. Now to again finish off the edging, I then went to the inside of the outer pieces where we have bent, and we are now going to do a layer or a strip around the inside of the basket, sandwiching all the bent pieces in between the edges. So I'm adding a bit of hot glue with my roll, and I just left the roll intact rather than trying to figure out how much to cut off. It was easy to do it this way. You could try to determine how much you need and cut it off, but I just left the roll intact and used little bits of hot glue now on the inside of the bent pieces and added the edging to sandwich them in between two pieces. When I got back to where I started, I just trimmed it off with my scissors, then went around and as carefully as possible to get it as close as possible to the edging pieces, I just trimmed off all the bent pieces that were sticking up. I then used a mixture of brown burnt umber acrylic paint and a little bit of black acrylic paint just from Dollar Tree and watered this down to use as my faux stain, staining the entire tobacco basket. If you haven't figured it out already, this is what we're making. Stained it all over, front, back, sides, everywhere. Then with one of these woodcraft slats, they are 2 by 6, I believe, 2 inches by 6 inches from Dollar Tree. I am using my homemade chalk paint in Swiss Coffee is the type of white it is. It's by Bear. And am just painting this all on, just one coat all over the front, back, sides. While the wood piece dried, I went on to the floral arranging part of the project. I used some of the maple leaves from Dollar Tree as well as some of these tiny faux pumpkins that come on a pick that's called pumpkin filler from Dollar Tree. It's just those orange pumpkins as well as some leaves. And I also used one of the cream clip pumpkins. They come on a piece of cardboard. They're hanging and they have little alligator clips on the back. I just removed the alligator clip from the bottom of it. Then I used some, it's not, actually, I believe it is raffia or some sort of filler. Raffia would definitely work, or the Hawaiian skirts. I used some of it. I used some wildflowers from Dollar Tree. I used some of these berries from their Dollar Tree's fall floral collection. However, I didn't like the color, so you will see me paint them shortly. And also when I split the pick, 4 of them fell off, so I just used some of this floral wire from Dollarama to reattach them all together just by winding it around numerous times, then trimming it and then just pushing it down as best I could. This held the 4 back in place fairly easily. Then I just made a greenish blue color, just a mixture of my own choice with some acrylic paints that I had from Dollar Tree, and painted this on to all the berries. Then so what I was doing before was kind of just dry fitting things to see where I like them. Now I've removed everything and I'm now coming in with my hot glue to glue them in place. So I started with gluing the 3 maple leaves to the back of to the basket. Then I'm adding in my, we'll call it raffia. I'm not 100% sure what it is called, but I glued in my raffia. Then I took some leaves that I had from my stash, just off other floral picks. I glued in my pumpkins, then I glued in my berries, and that's just kind of how I proceeded. I would just kind of put them in where I felt they looked best and just continued layering different pieces just till I was happy with it and till my eyes were happy. Again, everybody kind of has their own way of doing things. I used a little of the fall eucalyptus from Dollar Tree, and then I believe I also grabbed some of the lavender picks. I believe they're just named floral picks, but they're part of Dollar Tree's spring florals, I want to say. So you may have them in your stash if you're a DIYer or usual crafter, but it would obviously be a little hard to find now. But another thing, the reason I use them is we typically here in Canada don't have as much access to lamb's ear. So at least not for a good price. So this is kind of what this reminds me of, because it's kind of muted, velvety, very similar to lamb's ears. So I just took a couple of those and I'm putting them in. You just see me kind of putting them around. Like I said, I kind of dry fit to see where I think they look good. When I find a spot I like, I add some hot glue and glue it on. And that was it for the arrangement part of it. Then back to the sign. Off camera, I used my computer to create this gather printable. However, I didn't just print it on regular printer paper. That's why you see a bunch of supplies here. I have used the Hiipoo Waterslide Decal Papers and printed out this word gather that I created on my computer and printed it off on my inkjet printer. The lovely people at Hiipoo have given me a free pack of their waterslide decal papers to play with and use in my DIYs. So this video will also be featuring use of this waterslide decal paper in each of my projects. Once you've printed your decal, you'll then need to take it to a well-ventilated area and spray it 3 times with a clear acrylic spray. You'll do this by letting each coat dry for 10 minutes in between. Then you can bring it in. Once it's dry, you will then cut it out. You can also cut it out beforehand. I've done it both ways. And you'll get ready to apply your waterslide decal. You're going to do this by soaking your waterslide decal in a basin of water for 30 to 60 seconds. I found the shorter the better of these time frames. Sometimes maybe not even 30 seconds I needed. Then you will slowly slide off part of the decal off the white backing and use your thumb and finger. For me, I did it on my left hand to slide off about an 1/8 of an inch. Then I laid it on top of my project and determined where I wanted it. Once I was happy with where the placement was, I held with my left finger, you see here, my left pointer finger, I'm holding the edge of the decal onto my project, then slowly sliding out the white paper from underneath. Then you will go in and I took a tissue because I did try with paper towel, and I did find that Kleenex or tissue worked better for me. And very gently, gentle is your friend here, very gently dab off the excess water. And also if there's any water bubbles, you can work them out to the edges with the tissue. Start dabbing it towards the edge and they will come out. And then you are left with a beautiful decal that is completely smooth, wrinkle-free on your project. I very much recommend them for these flat wood projects. These are the 3 that I'm doing today are all wood painted surfaces, and they have been beautiful on them. I hope you feel the same way when you see them, but I'm very thrilled. Again, the very nice people at Hiipoo have given my viewers a discount if you'd like to pick up a pack. They're offering you 30% off, and with the coupon on Amazon, it's 40% off. So I will leave a link to the product in my description box below where you can find it, as well as the discount code. Thank you, Hiipoo, for sending me some papers and letting me play with this awesome product. With some jute rope from Dollarama, I cut off about a 6-inch piece and tied a simple knot to make a hanger. I inserted the sign into 2 of the squares and then glued down the bottom 2 corners with hot glue onto the basket above the floral arrangement. I then added some extra hot glue onto the back over the corners where I slipped it through just to give it some extra security. Then went in and added hot glue to the corner at the back of the basket to adhere the hanger. I reinforced the hanger with some extra hot glue over top of the knot from one side to the other, starting on the basket, going across the knot to the other side with my hot glue. Then with some jute twine from Dollar Tree, I wrapped it around my hand as wide as possible about 10 times, then cut it off, then cut an extra piece about a couple inches long just to tie around the center of this loop. We're going to make a multi-strand bow. I think that's what we could call it. I just tied off a knot here, trimmed the ends after realizing that 2 tails looked a little silly. So here I am just looking at it and being like, no, but then also no tails look silly as well. So I'm cutting some more strands. I think I did about 4, all the same length, that I will make into, I guess, faux tails. So I just cut 4 lengths, folded them in half, and then hot glued them onto the back of my bow. Once this was done, I hot glued the bow and the tails all together onto the corner top of the basket, just below the hanger, or in front of the hanger, I guess you could say, on the front side of the basket. The hanger's on the back side. Sorry. I gave it a little trim, and that is it. I am absolutely in love with this. I have tried searching for my American friends to find a product similar to this paper craft band that I got at Dollarama. I'm having trouble finding stuff. If any of my viewers know of anything similar that you guys can get for cheap, please let me know or share it with everybody. I'd love for you all to recreate this if you're interested. I'm just having trouble pointing in the right direction of what supplies to use. Hopefully this doesn't deter you from trying it out, maybe with something else you can think of that I haven't thought of. For my second Hobby Lobby inspired DIY, I started with 5 of these wooden garden stakes or plant labels that I got from Dollarama, and I cut off the pointed ends of all 5 of them. Actually, I started with all the 4 of them because they are going to be the same length, and then the 5th one is going to be shorter. So I did cut off the pointed end, but it also is cut to size to be the length that I needed. So this I just kind of eyeballed. I don't have exact measurements, but 3 slats are going to be at the front, and I just spaced them apart to what I liked, and then left a little space above and below, and that's how long I made the side pieces. Then to put this together, I used some of the square wooden beads from Dollar Tree. I adhered them on with hot glue, leaving just enough room for the shorter wood slat to fit on to the front slats and against the wooden cube, if that makes sense. So I put the wood cubes onto each end of the 3 long sticks, then added hot glue onto the sides of the cubes and glued on the shorter wood stake to make our sides. I'm now repeating that process here, adding the hot glue, then putting the wood stake onto the sides. So this is the front of our palette that we were creating. I added a small line of hot glue, as small as possible without having a detailed glue gun, as small as possible, and glued on the top. Then repeated the same process for the bottom, adding a line of hot glue, holding it on, adhering it, then repeating it on the other end, gluing it on, holding it on, and Bob's your uncle. Once the frame and the palette was complete, we're going to make our front pieces. To do this, I used another garden stake. I only needed 1, but I needed the full thing. So I cut off the end, measured out how long I needed it. Once I had that, I trimmed it and then cut the second piece to the same length. Then I needed to cut them down more narrow. You could leave them as a wider piece, but I liked it when it was more narrow. So I did this by drawing a line halfway down the length of the piece of wood stake that I'm holding and then tried to cut it, that wasn't working. So I scored it with my Dollar Tree square and a box cutter. I did this twice, then glued the pieces together on top of each other just to give it some height. Once this was done, I then glued on these I don't even know what you want to call them. I glued these pieces on to the front of the palette, and then it was complete. To paint it, I used some burnt orange, yes, burnt orange chalk paint from Craft Smart, which I got at Michael's. Actually, I lucked out and got it on sale for $1. So I gave it a rough coat because I did want to see some of the wood through. I didn't want it fully covered. So I did this all over, front, sides, everywhere. And then again, using the waterslide decal papers from Hiipoo, I created the printable that says "Welcome to our porch." I printed it out, did all the necessary steps by sealing it, letting it dry, which I have explained in DIY number 1. So now I am going to put them on to each slat. I just want to take this moment here to say thank you to my subscribers for supporting me. I really appreciate all of you and all the support you give me by watching my content, giving it some likes, subscribing, sharing it. And if you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Dana. I'd love it if you consider subscribing. If you like things all DIY, Dollar Tree, budget decor, and thrift flips, you've come to the right place. So why don't you consider hitting that subscribe button and the bell, and YouTube should notify you every time I upload a new video. So to finish this off, I grabbed a stick, a fairly large stick from my backyard, cut it down a bit, glued it on to the top of our pumpkin with some hot glue, took some raffia, this is actual raffia this time, that I got at Walmart because it's hard to find the raffia at Dollar Tree here. So I took some strands of raffia, tied it into a simple bow, adhered it on to the top of the crate and the stick at the center top, and then also just glued on the ends, trimmed them at the sides, glued them on to the edges just so they were out of the way and kind of maintained. And that is it. I hope you like it. You'll definitely have to let me know in the comments below which one is your favorite, but I think these all turned out great today. Now on to the last DIY for today. I started with one of these wood panels from Dollar Tree, just took it out of the packaging. It's 6 inches by 6 inches, but actually when I measured it, it actually isn't. But the first thing I wanted to do was make it look like it was faux panels. So I just measured out as evenly as possible as I could. I think I drew 6 slats on it. They were each just under about 1 inch wide. I just did this with my ruler and a pencil. Here I'm just erasing some of the marks I initially made on it. You probably don't have to do that. But to make the faux slats, I used my box cutter and ruler and just scored it a bunch of times. Don't go through it because, again, these are faux slats. But score it, I think I did about three to 5 passes. Actually, maybe if we're counting 1, 2, 3. I did about 3 passes on each one. So do 3 passes on each one with your box cutter. Then you're going to go back in, and I used a small screwdriver from Dollar Tree. And this is where we're going to kind of widen the cuts we just made to make them a little more noticeable. So I'm just going across carefully with my screwdriver and kind of just scraping out the lines as best as I can to kind of make some indentations. I just want a little well kind of thing to give us the faux shiplap look. So I did this for all the lines using the screwdriver along each one. Then with some burnt umber acrylic paint from Dollar Tree and a small paintbrush, I'm just adding some paint into the wells so that they are darker. Then again with my mixture of burnt umber acrylic paint and some black and water, I faux stained this. I'm doing this part really fast because I will show you that this was user error, not Hiipoo Waterslide Decal error. I made this printable, but when I placed it on, it did not show up that good. You can barely see the writing. Like, you can see the pumpkin, you can see the writing, but it's really hard. It doesn't stand out. So my error, anyways, do as I say, not as I did kind of thing. Go with a lighter background, or I guess don't use such a light font. So I sanded off the decal and sanded it down a bit. And this beautiful triangle is just a product error. But when I went to, so I'm just staining it slightly just to bring the brown back a little more, because my idea was to dry brush some white on top. That way my printable would stand out. So at first I started off lightly dry brushing, but that was making the boo-boo in the middle much more noticeable. So then I went a little heavier, especially in the middle, to conceal this boo-boo. That's not my boo-boo. It came like this. But of course I didn't see it when I bought it. Anyways, when you add paint, of course, these flaws like to expose themselves. Anyways, you can work around it. So yes, like I did, I added some white paint. I gave it a rough coat all over the fronts and sides. Then using the printable I made that says Happy Harvest with a pumpkin, I printed it off on the Hiipoo Waterslide Decal Papers again. I'm really liking these, if I haven't said it already. So I'm taking all the steps necessary, or I have taken all the steps necessary to prepare my piece before putting in the water. Again, this was explained in DIY number 1 if you want to go back to it for any clarification. But I am just soaking my decal until it starts to slide off of the white backing, and then I will moisten the surface of my project. I just use a small little spray bottle with some water. I not dry off, I just let as much water drip off as I can from the decal into the basin, and then position my decal where I want it by slowly sliding off about 1/8 of an inch. Then I hold this in place with my left hand while I slide out the white paper backing from the back with my right hand. I am right-handed, so that's how it's most comfortable for me to do. If you're left-handed, it would probably be opposite, but this is what works for me. So anyways, I had part of my decal stick over. I made it a little too big, but I just tucked it around the edges and it adhered nicely. Now I'm just blotting off the excess water with my tissues and getting out any of the bubbles by working them from the center out to the edges. And that is it. Another beautiful fall decor piece made for pennies. Thank you so much for watching today. I really hope you enjoyed all these projects. Again, like I said, please let me know which one was your favorite. It helps me to also know what sort of content to bring you in the future, as well as just I love to see which one you guys like best, see if it correlates with which one I like best. But this one, honestly, I had such trouble. I don't know if I even have a favorite. I love them all. If you want to keep watching, here are some videos I think you might like. As always, thanks for watching, and if you want to see more of this content, like more DIYs and thrift flips, why don't you consider hitting that big red subscribe button to be notified anytime I upload a new video. Bye!